Thank you, Ellie. I'm very pleased to be here with Ellie today, as I was also with Paul Lukey. Paul Lukey played the same role in the House that Ellie played for me in the Senate, which was to make me seem moderate. Without which life would have been much more difficult. Walter Jones is probably too hard on himself. He really did get it wrong. He was the one that came up with freedom fries and freedom toast, and he does have the decency to feel kind of embarrassed about all that. But it's more than embarrassed. I mean, Walter was simply in the same position that every other Republican was in. He was citing the talking points that he was given, but when it became apparent that there was no nuclear weapons program, there were no chemical weapons, there were no biological weapons, there were no WMD in Iraq. There was no tie between the Hussein regime. The Hussein regime was repugnant, but they were not repugnant in the same way. They were not part of Al-Qaeda. Other Republicans just said, okay, do we have no talking points? What should I say now? But Walter felt lied to in a very personal way, and felt a sense of responsibility for having believed the lies that very few people in politics have. And he has been repentant. And what he has done, as part of his repentance, is something that few members of Congress have done, and I have not done the way he has done. But I've done enough. I've gone out to Walter Reed enough. I've visited with the kids who were terribly injured back home in the district that I've represented, which is, a lot of that is rural, poor North Carolina. And I've gone to the funerals or visitations for the kids who have lost their lives. And I've seen them, I've seen their circumstances, and the wars that we have had lately, Iraq and Afghanistan, are not like wars we've had in the past. They are not an effort of our entire society. We hire kids to go fight for us. And the kids we hire are not the kids that most members of Congress know. They're not the children of their friends. It is rare for me to write one letter to two set of parents of condolence. I write two letters. And I visited, in going to visitation, there's sort of one group of family over on one side of the room, another group over at the other side of the room. And I've seen the devastation in those kids' lives. Yes, this is expensive. We've gone from spending 3% of our GDP a decade ago to 4% of our GDP. That's real money. It really does affect our ability to address our needs at home. But as your speaker has already said, we have got now an obligation for the rest of the lives, a lot of the kids who've been so very badly injured. But I've also visited in Afghanistan twice. That is a society that has not seen peace in more than a generation. They've been in a conflict, or in conflict, for more than a generation, from the 1970s. It's not the same conflict. It's not the same size. In fact, some of the folks that are now our enemies have been our friends in the past. We've always been at least lightly involved in the conflict in Afghanistan. Conflict does terrible things to societies. It destroys their economy. You can't make an economy work when they're in the middle of a war, when there's violence all around them and a lack of security. It makes governing the country very difficult. And then extreme poverty and ungoverned areas lead to further conflict. General Anthony Zinni, who was the Chief of Staff of the Marines, said that ungoverned areas and extreme poverty are the petri dish for radicalism and violence. I dearly wish for the people of Afghanistan that they can find peace in that society, that they can have a functioning economy, that they can have a government that protects them and makes it possible for them to educate their kids and have normal lives. And they are now one of the most impoverished nations in the world. I do not oppose the use of military in any and all circumstances, as probably most of you, neither do most of you I know. I know that there is a bumper sticker that some of you may have in your car War is not the answer. When I see the bumper sticker, I think to myself, well, it might be. What was the question? If we can use military carefully, thoughtfully, in a smart way, and prevent the genocide or put an end to the genocide, there are circumstances in which I support the use of the military. But we've also learned again and again, or we should have learned again and again, that we cannot impose a military solution on another nation's political problems. We should have learned that in Iraq. We should still be learning it in Afghanistan. I think we are doing better. Our strategy makes more sense in Afghanistan now than it did 5 years ago. When I visited Afghanistan just the last couple of years, the military generals, the NATO general, I think it was Canadian, said that one of the problems we still face in Afghanistan is that in the first few years we were there, we killed a lot of the wrong people. And you know, that kind of makes people mad when you kill a relative of theirs and they were the wrong people to kill. It actually makes them mad even if they were the right people to kill. But it's even worse if they were not really the wrong people to kill. And the Taliban is certainly no treat. There's nothing about the Taliban that makes me want them to govern that society. But the problem that we've got in Afghanistan isn't our enemies. The problem is our friends. We are supporting a government that is as corrupt, that is certainly not committed to democracy. And I have no idea that they will last, and they certainly don't have the support of the people, and it's very likely that shortly after we do finally end, or sometime after we finally end our military involvement, the leaders of that regime will flee the country and are reunited with their Swiss bank accounts. There's only so much we can do. It's not that I don't want to do it. It's that as a practical matter, we simply cannot fix another country's problems with our military. And our military inevitably is resented as foreigners. They do not want foreigners on their soil. They would rather have the enemies that are their own enemies rather than our forces who are there to help them, supposedly. So we must recognize that there is got to come an end to this. And whether that end is 2013, as we've recently heard, which is more hopeful than 2014, there has got to come an end to it. And we've also got to recognize the limits of how we can use our military power in the world.